couple weeks left in the high school football regular season, but we know who's going to the playoffs and who's not. I'm Kyle Parmley, joined by Gary Lloyd. This is the Under the Lights podcast presented by SYNLawn. Gary, we got 2 weeks left of regular season play, but we know I think we've got 8 of our 11 teams heading to the postseason. We're really getting to we get to kind of reset a little bit here and get to a really exciting time of the year.
Yeah, it seemed like early on this year we thought we might have quite a few teams in the playoffs, and lo and behold, we do. And it looks like we're about to be putting some miles on our vehicles here that come November.
Very much so, but that's just the way we like it. So we will dive into all of that as we go on the show today. But first, I want to tell you about our friends at SYNLawn Alabama, who has been a great partner with us all fall. They bring you the podcast. They bring you a lot of our high school football coverage throughout the year. SYNLawn's your go-to for all things artificial turf, whether you're looking to upgrade your backyard, create a pet-friendly space, or enhance your golf game with a custom putting green. SYNLawn has a solution for you. With top-notch installations for both residential and commercial use and wholesale turf sales, SYNLawn Alabama is the premier choice for artificial turf in this state. You can call them at 205-590-9549 or visit the showroom at 2018 Old Montgomery Highway. At SYNLawn, artificial grass never looked more natural. All right, Gary, if you've been following us on X all year, you got updated on some great games last Friday night. If you're not following, at UnderLights365 on X, that's where you get all of our stuff throughout the week and all your score updates on Friday nights. There was also a popular retweet on the Player of the Week poll that we'll get to a little bit later on as well. But Gary, I guess we need to talk about, let's see, we just finished up week 8. Let's dive into them. We know last week we teased all these 3 region title games that we had. Well, out of the 3, only one of the teams in the Under the Lights area was able to get the job done and clinch the region title in one of those games, and that would be the Hoover Bucks. They knock off Thompson 27-26 in overtime, and man, we've seen Hoover and Thompson play some classics over the years, but this one, it's pretty close to the top of that list. I don't know what you got to see from that game, but me being out there, the atmosphere was amazing. It's a back-and-forth game, 2 evenly matched opponents, and Hoover comes up with the big play at the end, winning in overtime, and the celebration began. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said last week, like we have not known what to get over the years, these last 7-8 years from this game, because we've seen the gauntlet, we've seen everything, and really we should have known the Under the Lights game of the week has delivered at like a 90% clip this year.
Absolutely.
We should have known. We absolutely should have known that, hey, this is going to be a 1-point game in overtime. And yeah, just instant classic, incredible game. I don't know what you saw execution wise and all that, and just kind of the flow of the game and that kind of thing. But more than anything, just obviously big props to Jonah Winston, going for 130 yards or so total, 2 touchdowns, the game winner, and then just Hoover as a whole. Can't say enough about him. Like it's been crazy to think about, what we saw kind of end of July, early August with, a lot of turmoil kind of surrounding that program with what happened in the off season. And then to see where they are now, still undefeated in the region champs. They win in that fashion at Thompson, which has become, there's a big game we'll talk about this week, but that's become kind of their rivalry. And you go to their place and win it in that fashion. Where they were and where they are now for Hoover has just been nothing short of inspirational,
Yeah.
I guess is the word I would go with. And that team is fighting hard and playing well. And, they've had some inconsistencies at times, but they just keep finding ways to get it done. And they look like a team with a lot of belief, and certainly looks like a threat to play late into November.
Yeah, I thought Hoover really dominated the first half of the game. They get up 10-0, and then they let Thompson back into it. It's 10-10 at the half, and back and forth we went the rest of the night. You mentioned Jonah Winston. He had 2 touchdowns in the game. Both of them were critical. The first one was a 30-yard run on 4th down and 1. They put him in at quarterback on 4th and 1 to get the first down, and He takes it around left edge, and nobody touched him all the way to the house. And then in overtime, Thompson got the ball first and scored, but the same thing that befell them in the Clay Chalkwell loss, the extra point, the exchange between the snap and the holder was not clean, and the extra point got blocked by Trey Sanders. So with that being said, and immediately at that moment, everybody was like, Hoover's about to win. They're going to score a touchdown, kick the extra point, win the game. And, Jonah Winston scores a touchdown. Matthew Diabas kicks the extra point, and Hoover wins. But you mentioned Hoover's journey to get here, and Jonah Winston said that to us after the game. He said that, this team is battle tested. There's nobody that's been through the same things we have, and they've really leaned on that as the season has gone along here. I don't know how much I believe him, but Matthew Diabas, after the game, we talked to him, and we were like, so when they missed that extra point, what did it hit you? Like, oh man, this game's coming down to my leg if we score. And he really downplayed it. He was just like, extra points are routine. Like, it's one thing if you kick like a game-winning 35, 40-yard field goal, but he's like, extra points, like you got to make those. Those are you take those for granted. But still a really big moment for him and that team. And I'm telling you, Hoover, I thought they played really well overall in that game. They outgained Thompson by about 50 yards. Hoover's defense played pretty well. They held them to 270 yards of total offense. So big win for the Bucks. That does a lot for them. That gives them that region title back. I think that's the third one in the last 5 years for them, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, really impressive win.
All right, let's talk about a game that you saw. Clay Chalkwell suffers their first loss of the year. Oxford wins 21-10. Clay Chalkwell gets up 10-0, and then mistakes, and Oxford really turned up the heat. We talked about that Mason Mims to Nick Richardson connection on Oxford's offense, and it struck twice. So big win for the Yellow Jackets. That I think that's going to shuffle up the Class 6A top 5 this week.
Yeah, it definitely will. I think you'll see. I mean, I did say it, preseason, Oxford was one of my top 3 teams, and it was a lot. It had a lot to do with their experience, and their experience, I think, is, and I talked to Coach Sam Adams after the game. I think that experience is a lot of what got them this win. They go down 10-0, and you're starting to go, okay, here we go again. Clay Chalkwell's going to do it. Clay Chalkwell does. And then just so many self-inflicted mistakes for Clay Chalkwell. A lot of pre-snap. I had them called for, I think, 12 penalties in the game, 8 of which were in the first half. They stayed playing behind the sticks most of the game, really. Other than a couple drives in the first quarter, they were backed up a lot. They had 2 plays that Aaron Fry really just kind of dropped the ball in the bucket for his receivers that would have been touchdowns, and the guys were open and they just dropped it. And so just a lot of mistakes that they made, shooting themselves in the foot, let Oxford hang around. And then, you get close to half and Oxford drops back and they hit a couple bombs, like you mentioned, from Mason Mims to Nick Richardson. And then that Oxford defense that, hasn't got as much talk as, Mason Mims, who's committed to Louisville, and, these receivers who are really good. But Keenan Britt, I think he's committed to South Carolina, was a monster, especially in the second half. I mean, he had double-digit tackles. He probably had 15, 16 tackles, sack, tackle for loss. Like, he was everywhere. And, Clay Chalkwell's last couple of drives, it was like, okay, as soon as they snapped the ball, 10 was in the backfield. And, they just got in, again, that's just Clay Chalkwell getting into those situations kind of on their own. They make a mistake and they're looking at 2nd and 15. They're looking at 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. And they put themselves in obvious passing downs, and Oxford, put pressure on them, and it worked. So that 21 game winning streak, I think it was, comes to an end, and Clay Chalkwell's really going to have to check itself going forward, because that wins the region for Oxford, and Clay Chalkwell will still be probably a 2 seed and play at home in the first round, but they're going to have to lick their wounds pretty quick and shore up a lot of things, because that was just a weird game overall, and Clay Chalkville didn't really look like the Clay Chalkville we're accustomed to. And give credit to an experienced Oxford team for kind of making the night tough on them.
What did you see? Like, the stuff that Clay struggled with as correctable things. Like, is this something like, hey, they
Yeah.
play the way they normally play, they're fine?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the game still was 21-10, a 21-10 final. And, early on you go up 10-0, but then, Marlon Compton had to adjust on a ball. And if he comes down with it, hits him right in the hands, but maybe it was just a touch off the tip of the fingers. But if he, good throw, but if he comes down with it, that's a touchdown because he's in the end zone with it. Another one later in the half, Aaron Fry hit a receiver in stride and just right off the fingertips, and he was in the end zone. So, and then, like I said, the penalties, it was very unlike them to have this pre-snap type stuff a lot. And yeah, I think most everything was correctable. And then the drops and stuff like that. It was kind of a lot of things happened all at once in one game that compounded themselves that we're not used to seeing from Clay Chalkville. And I think it's probably an aberration, a one-off of sorts. But again, give credit to Oxford for playing well enough to win the game and fight and claw. And they were down 10-0, so they didn't lay down. And they held Clay Chalkville scoreless the rest of the way and did what they needed to do with some big plays. And Nick Richardson was huge for his 2 touchdowns and really just beat Clay Chalkville. He is an exceptional route runner. Like, I know he's going to play baseball at the next level, but my Twitter all weekend was, hey, we know Nick Richardson's going to play baseball, but where are the college football coaches? Where are his offers to play wide receiver? Because he's a really good route runner. Again, very experienced, and his 2 touchdowns, he was wide open. So a lot of things to correct for Clay Chalkville, but nothing that would concern me to the point of wondering, like, are they going to get out of the first round? That kind of thing.
Yeah, Clay Chalkville will still be at home in the first round of the playoffs, and then we'll see from there. The third region title game we had, Parker defeats Homewood 27-17. Homewood had its fair share of adversity in this game. I mean, quarterback Will Myers goes out with injury for the second straight game. They have to put Caleb Carson in at quarterback to steer the ship once again. But even with all of that, they only lose by 10. They compete really well against a Parker team that has made quick work of many opponents this year. So nothing for the Patriots to hang their head about, but they'll have to bounce back quick this week.
Yeah, it seems like a game not completely unlike Parker at Mountain Brook earlier this year, maybe a little bit, kept it close, and you had a chance. And like you said, Will Myers goes out of that game, and it seemed like Caleb Carson played fairly well in the second half in relief of him. And we know Caleb's got that experience playing quarterback as well. Ultimately, it just seemed like, reading some of the stuff from the game, it seemed like Homewood's defense maybe couldn't quite tackle the way they wanted to, couldn't quite get guys on the ground like Terrence Gaines and what's the other guys, like Chancellor Sparks, just kind of, were able to run the ball and were able to reel off some big runs. And you couldn't quite keep them from moving the chains. So tough loss, but a 27-17 game against a team like that, when your quarterback goes out, you don't want to lose. But there's probably some positives to take from that as well, going into the playoffs.
All right, let's run through the rest of the scores from last Friday night. Spain Park beats Calera 42-7. That locks up the region title for the Jags, their first one since 2015. Chelsea falls to Helena 38-28, a second straight loss for the Hornets after that 6-0 start. A few big shutout wins. Hewitt-Trussville beats Oak Mountain 63-0. Vestavia Hills beats Tuscaloosa County 42-0. And on Thursday night, Mountain Brook beat Huffman 42-0. And then finally, Corner hangs on against John Carroll 34-27, which, as we talked about last week, officially eliminates Briarwood from the playoffs. Gary, any final thoughts on what we saw last week?
Out of those, I mean, nothing on the shutouts other than apparently if I say something nice about the Hewitt Trustful defense, it's not rat poison. They just pitch a shutout after I give
Yeah.
them praise and make that make those defensive stats look even better. So that was impressive. But Chelsea losing at home to Helena, we knew Helena was more than capable of putting up some points, and they were able to run wild against Chelsea, and that's a really tough loss there. Coming back after that game at Spain Park for Chelsea, when both of those teams were 6-0, because now it looks like Helena's probably in the driver's seat for that 2 seed if it's not already locked up. I'm
Yeah.
not exactly sure yet, so that could be a game that effectively puts you on the road now in the first round of the playoffs, as opposed to earning that 2 seed and playing at home. But offense did a lot of good things, just couldn't stop the run. So that was a tough loss, but good on Helena for going and playing at a tough place to play and doing everything they needed to do to get that win.
All right, our scores from last week brought to you by SYNLawn. Thanks to them for bringing you the show this year. All right, Gary, let's before we dive into week 10. Wow, week 10. Unbelievable. Let's talk to our interview guest this week. Glad to be joined this week on the Under the Lights podcast presented by SYNLawn by Vestavia Hills head coach Robert Evans. Coach Evans, congrats on pulling this season. I guess it could have been out of the ditch, right? I mean, you guys had the roughest start, the toughest schedule that you could imagine, and here you guys are sitting at 4-4 at 500. So, I mean, how'd you guys manage that?
It's a great question. And, this has been probably the most challenging year that I've ever had professionally. And part of it was the schedule, and part of it was just injuries. We just had an inordinate amount of injuries, and part of that was bad luck, and some of it's just the brutal schedule. But we knew on the front end we needed to split Trustful and Hillcrest to be able to control our destiny in the second half of the season. Fortunately, after a brutal loss to Trustful, we got the Hillcrest game and got fresh and healthy, and as healthy as we could be, and have played well 3 weeks in a row. And it's a credit to our coaches and our staff. And we've got a bunch of young kids playing that were playing on Monday nights to start the season. They're now playing on Friday nights, and they've grown up. And Charlie Taft is playing really good football, and I think he's the best quarterback in our region right now, and I wouldn't trade him for anyone. And when you get good quarterback play, you got a chance most Friday nights.
Is this season the way it's trending right now, where y'all are kind of peaking a little bit, playing really well? Is it kind of similar to 2022 in any way for you?
Yeah, I mean, both schedules were front loaded, with teams. Now this one is the hardest schedule I've ever tried to do, and it's probably the hardest schedule in the state. When you think about Carver, Montgomery, 17 of their 22 starters have Division I offers. And then going to Auburn. Auburn's the best team in the state this year. Did not know that at the front end, but they are the best team in the state right now. And then you go Trustful, Hillcrest, Thompson. And now our road finishing is going to be at Hoover, Clay Chalkwell next week, Mary G. Montgomery. And then if you win Mary G., you go Central Phoenix. Like, talk about bookended schedules. And it's a who's who of who's the top 10 in Alabama. But I really am a firm believer that you just get hardened to doing hard things over time. And I think just the general, our general level has been raised because of our schedule. And when we got to some teams that were like us or similar to us or that we're a little better than, we just accelerated the growth. And, it's a good lesson for these kids to go off into life with. It's like, attempt great things, try to do hard things. I think there's a lot of paper tigers specifically in Birmingham that are sitting around at 7-1 or 6-2, and you look at the schedule, it's like, who have they really beaten? And so we'll be as hardened and battle tested as anybody when the playoffs come around. We go take on a good Mary G. Montgomery team, but we've seen probably 4 or 5 teams that are better than them, and we'll have a chance. And if we play well, we'll have a good chance to advance. But it's been forced growth for both myself, our staff, and our players this year through the thick of it.
We talked earlier in the year about the importance of the psyche of the locker room, because like you can see the talent and the growth and the progression, but when the results aren't necessarily there, it can be tough to get a high school kid to buy into that. Was there a point when you saw the switch flip, or maybe the light bulb come on, like, hey, this team finally understands that they're pretty good?
Right. I think after we took 2 just butt kickings to start the season, and we had no idea about Carver, how good they were going to be. They had lost in the first round to Briarwood as a 6A school, and Coach Carr came in, and they got Sidney Lanier's players and Carver's players, and you look at their talent, 17 of the 22 that's ridiculous. I don't think anybody else in Alabama is even close, especially in this day and age of transfer portals and how hard it is to get offers. Their roster is unbelievable with talent, and they were up on Central Phoenix. They were competitive with Auburn, up on Opelika, like all the teams that are going to be in the playoffs. But when we took 2 butt kickings, we just didn't know. And then you come back to Trussville and lose a close game, and then we handled business against Hillcrest, and that's when you kind of breathe a sigh of relief and said, "This is what we're kind of used to." And but also, you're just breaking in a new quarterback who's a young kid and breaking in a lot of young players. And sometimes it just takes some time. And, but we're battle testing a hardened group, and there's a lot of self-belief and confidence going into the last 3 or 4 games of the season, hopefully more.
Yeah. We've kind of, or maybe me, have kind of joked, not seeing you guys yet, like, oh, Vestavia will play well this week with their 19 running backs. And, you mentioned forced growth, and I know y'all have had injuries and that stinks, but like that forced growth, how are you and your coaches able to kind of foster that forced growth? Like, it's one thing to tell a sophomore, like, hey, we need you to do this, but what is it that's gotten through to these young guys that's been allowed them to do it?
I just think it's experience. Like when Charlie started the season, our 3rd play of the season, we dropped the snap and Carver picks it up, scoops and scores. And then he's getting kind of beat up by, they were really good defensively that night. But when you go against Carver and Auburn, which is 2 of the probably top 5 or 6 teams in the state, and then all of a sudden you get to, and Thompson in the first half of the season, and Trussell's good on defense as well. It's like when you get to teams that are like us or we're a little bit better than, it's almost like taking your donut off the bat and going up to swing. Like you've seen about as good as you can see. Everybody else in comparison, relatively speaking, is not as good. And so there's a level of confidence that he can go in and say, I've seen pretty much the best the state has to offer. Thompson's really good defensively. Carver's good defensively. Auburn's good defensively. Hillcrest was decent, and then Trussell's good defensively. and now we get to Hoover and Clay Chalkville, and both of them are good, but he's been through it. I think experience is just the best teacher for us all.
The Under the Lights game of the week this week is your Vestavia Hills team heading to Hoover. You spent many years on staff with Josh Niblett as the defensive coordinator. What are some of your fondest memories from those days at Hoover High?
Wow, that's a great question. Everybody says you don't have favorite teams. Well, I think that's garbage. You have favorite teams, and I think the year we had just a great. It's actually Ben Abercrombie's senior year, and I still keep up with Ben, and his story is just awesome. But that was just a special group of seniors coming off a tough loss to, I think, Spain Park maybe the year before in the semifinals, and that was just a special group. But really just the relationships you make. And it's fun to see and keep up with kids. We've got one of our former players from Hoover on our staff, and Preston Sanford, and just keeping up with those kids. High school sports in reality, in actuality, we compete and we try to win, and there's good banter back and forth, but it's about the relationships and the friendships you kind of make along the way. But Josh did an unbelievable job, and I think people probably appreciate Josh a lot more over there than they did when he left. I think you could probably, when I left in 2017, you could kind of sense maybe just a little bit of apathy creeping in. And but they've had a good year this year, and they've got a very talented team that reminds me a little bit of some of the more talented teams back when Rush and Josh was there. And so, they're just, they have some monsters on their team, and they're huge and a good looking team. And you credit Chip. You just think all the dysfunction in the summer right before the season, and their staff has done a nice job making the most of a tough situation. And so they put themselves in prime spot, winning the region. But man, I took this job to take on the Hoovers and Thompsons and Trussvilles of the world. You don't come here to play Chelsea and Alina. I mean, and no disrespect to those teams, but you want to play in these big games, and our kids are excited and be amped up to get over to the Met and play a big game Friday night.
Without giving away the game plan, obviously, but I'm curious, like, how you and your staff kind of prepare for a team like this that, like, Hoover has had a successful year, but there's seemingly been some inconsistencies. Like, we've seen them win 8-7, we've seen them win 40-6. Like,
Yeah.
When you see all this different kind of film, like, what do you kind of focus on?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've probably changed more so as I've gotten older. I used to have really rigid game plans, specifically at Hoover, and now I just think differently. I mean, we have a game plan, but it's very fluid because you don't ever get, half the time you don't get what you work on anyway. So you need to be good at kind of what what your program's built on. And for us, it's kind of being multiple on both sides of the ball and being able to adapt on the fly. And that's kind of, I guess, where I've grown. But when you look at Hoover, it's just pretty incredible. There's a bunch of trees standing out there as receivers. I mean, those guys are tall. They already had a bunch of talent. And I tell you, the quarterback's very talented. Jonah Winston's a winner. You can tell when he's in the game. I think their kids really believe when he's in there as a quarterback, whether it's Wildcat or conventional offense, he's a problem. And they've just got tremendous skill and size on both the offense and defensive fronts. And that's where football's won and lost. And so Hoover's always going to have good players. They have the best players in our region this year. They're the most talented team. I don't think a lot of people were picking Thompson last week, and I don't think this is one of Thompson's better teams in the last 6 or 7 years, and they would probably agree with that as well. But Hoover's, I think, significantly more talented, is the most talented team in the region. But they have, self-destructed in some games, specifically Parker and Spain Park, where they just turn the ball over, and we can attest to that. When we turn the ball over, we have no chance to win against the more talented teams. And when they turn the ball over, they win close or lose close. That's the difference, is that they're just loaded with talent. And the transfer quarterback is a really interesting player. He makes a lot of tough plays that most kids probably can't make. And then he'll make a decision that probably drives his coaches crazy, probably 2 or 3 times a game, where he'll force the ball. And that's 16 and 17-year-old kids. I mean, that happens. But he's a very talented player, and they've done a nice job supplementing their rosters. They've got a few transfers in, and they were already talented to begin with. And so it's going to be a tough game, but our kids believe, and we'll have to take care of the ball and value the ball. And if we do that, we'll be there in the second half with a chance.
I want to ask about, Gary, you mentioned earlier, you guys have had games where you hand the ball off to 10, 12 different guys, depending on the situation of the game. But so Bruce Littleton was up for our player of the week a couple of weeks ago. And what position do you guys call him? Because he's not a running back, is he?
Yeah, Bruce is a former quarterback. He's a left-handed pitcher committed to Southern Miss that throws 95 from the left-hand side. And so he's probably actually got a chance to get drafted, but he gets his honest. Actually, his mom, this is really interesting. His mom used to play football for Hoover, and they made Bridget, quit when she was in the 9th grade. So he's got some ties to Hoover. I think Coach Finley made her. She's like, hey, you can't. All right, we're past the point where you can keep playing. So, but Bridget is as tough as they come, and Bruce is chip off the old block. I mean, he really is. He is a really good player, and he's a 220-pound jumbo athlete that can. He's an emergency quarterback for us. He can block. He can run the ball. He's got great hands. And really, if he wanted to play football somewhere in college, people are dying to find players like Bruce that can do a little bit of everything. I like to say he's a queen of the chessboard. In theory, he's what we call an H, so he's a move H, so he's all over the place, but he can move every which way. He can do a lot of different things, and we have to utilize him. He'll need to have a big game if we have a chance to win Friday.
Yeah, and Coach Bridget Meadow is obviously she's won her fair share of state championships as the girls soccer coach at Vestavia.
Yeah, she's tougher than I am, so he gets it honest.
I want to ask you to look ahead a little bit. Hate to do that to a coach, but we've talked about it in the past. Are you glad now that the playoffs are looming that we've got this little bit of shakeup where y'all are playing Region 1 and then 2 versus 4?
Yes. So glad in that we are in the playoffs, and I would drive to Alaska if we had to keep playing. Like I really would. So Mobile doesn't seem that bad, but I'll go anywhere to just stay alive and have a chance. And really, you just don't know in Region 2 or 3. Like it is a huge. We had made the playoffs maybe once in the last 6 years before we got here, and then we've made it 3 for 3. I mean, and I'm really proud of that. It hadn't been done in a long time, in over 10 years, because this region is just brutal. And so to make it 3 years in a row, and we'll have a chance hopefully in the first round game. But I tell you, it is interesting. I love the new format, but there's some kinks that I think should be worked out. And really, if this was this time next year, and nobody talks about this, but this is crazy. If this was this time next year, we match up with Region 2 next year. So imagine if our region matched up with theirs in the first round, we would be going to Auburn. All right. The 2 seed in our region, Thompson, would be hosting Opelika or Carver. All right. The 3 seed in our region, Trustful, would be going to Central Phoenix. And then the 4 seed, whether it be Enterprise, would be traveling to Hoover. And that's the first round of the playoffs, while you have lesser teams in Mobile and Huntsville going against. So that would be the equivalent of Georgia playing Michigan and Alabama playing Ohio State and LSU playing Penn State, while Tulane plays Central Florida and TCU plays SMU. I mean, that would never happen. And I'm saying a year in advance, state of Alabama, let's get this fixed, right? And I need you 2 guys to advocate for that. Because
so you don't think the idea of a Mobile team traveling 7 hours to Huntsville is a good plan?
Yeah, I'm sure they're like me. I mean, my perspective is I'll travel wherever, whenever, as long as we just have a chance and our kids have a chance to advance. We'll go wherever. So it's. I love the quadrants. I really do love the quadrants. And my plan, if I was the commissioner of 7A football, would to put all 32 teams in, and outside of the top 2 teams, then do a power poll and have a 32 team bracket like 6A and 7A, or like 5A, 6A, or 1A through 6A has. But nobody listens to me. The state would make a lot more money. It would be a lot more interesting. But I do love, like, I credit the state, like almost everybody is for this format, so that we don't run into Thompson or whoever this 3rd year in a row in the second round.
Yep. All right. I also have in my notes that Coach wants to talk about politics, theology.
Yes,
and,
reform theology. Yes, me and Gary had a great discussion. And Gary, I think at the time we last spoke, Joe Biden was actually the Democrat nominee at the time. But there's been a lot of life since that point in time, Gary. So
Yeah.
do you have any predictions for the upcoming election? I mean,
Oh God.
what do you
I
think?
think I need here's what I know will happen. Chaos. Chaos will happen.
Yeah.
And this thing right here of mine, I won't be on it that Tuesday night. I can guarantee you that. I'll probably go sit outside. I'm in the middle of a book about George Washington, so I'll probably sit outside under some lights and read that.
Yeah, well, Tuesday night in 2 weeks, we'll be getting ready for Mary G. Montgomery, and I'll be watching the practice tape and then sending out corrections to our players. So I won't know, and my guess is just my inkling, and I really don't have a whole lot of time to keep up with the stuff this time of year, is that it won't be settled Tuesday night. It'll probably be litigated for several weeks or months. That's just the way things are trending right now. I mean, that would be my guess. I think Trump would have to win in a landslide to actually get elected. Then otherwise, it's going to be mass chaos. I think it will be chaotic situation. But funny enough, like I actually did think before the season, the summer is like, well, the playoffs are right around the time of the election, and you just kind of get this sense as an American that it is going to be just maybe not once in a lifetime event, but that there's something monumental that's brewing, and who knows what that is. I have no guesses. I kind of stay out of the political realm with our team. We don't talk about it, but we've had 2 assassination attempts, and you got we had the nominee replaced in the middle of the process, and just the twists and turns, and the only thing that's certain is it won't be normal or like years past. I mean, maybe like what year was that? The 2000 election or 2004 that was contested in Florida, and the Supreme Court ultimately ruled on. But who knows? good thing is we don't major in politics here. We try to major in winning football.
Love it. Well, that's a great place to wrap up this interview. All right, Coach Evans, we really appreciate you coming on with us. Looking forward to being out there on Friday night. Big time rivalry game. Should be fun.
Yes. Appreciate all you guys do for high school sports. Look forward to seeing you guys.
Thank you, Coach.
Big thanks to Coach Evans for coming on with us and spending a few moments with us. Always love talking to him. All right, Gary, let's dive into top performers from last week. If you follow Under the Lights on X at Underlights365, that's where you see the Player of the Week poll first. You get it in the Saturday morning newsletter. Plenty of opportunities to vote. And Gary, I'm glad to say we had a record turnout at the polls last week for Player of the Week. So here's the 4 that we had. Hoover's Jonah Winston. We talked about him. He had 137 total yards, a pair of touchdowns. Chelsea wide receiver CJ Durbin, 12 grabs, 198 and a touchdown. Vestavia Hills quarterback Charlie Taff had a big game, 324 total yards and scored 4 touchdowns. And Spain Park quarterback Brock Bradley threw for 210 yards and 4 touchdowns, all in the first half. So with over 600 votes in this week's poll and an endorsement from Jameis Winston to vote for Jonah Winston, somehow, some way, Chelsea wide receiver CJ Durbin wins Player of the Week. Pretty impressive to get the endorsement from Jameis to vote for Jonah, have like twice as many votes as we normally do, and for CJ to still win Player of the Week. So CJ Durbin's big congrats to you. 198 receiving yards is certainly well worth the honor. So kudos to him, and yeah, can't wait to see what we get in week 10 for top performers, because as we just see week after week, these guys are putting up incredible games, and this past week was nothing short of that.
For sure. Yeah, it was crazy. I can't remember where I was Saturday, but my phone pops up, Twitter notification, because I was like, hey, 2 more days to vote, vote in this poll. And I don't know if it was like Jameis's agent or something like that, or some sort of group that followed me and retweeted it. And then a few minutes later, I start, Twitter's like boom, 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 boom. And I was like, what is going on? It was like Jameis Winston retweeted. And I was like, oh, snap. These votes are about to go boom, boom, like that. So shout out to Jameis for doing that. And, for supporting the family there. But really, yeah, Chelsea got out, voted early, voted often. And it was enough to keep CJ on top. 12 catches, 198. That is a crazy stat line.
Yeah, I was just looking back at the Twitter post, and man, some people never read the comments, Gary. Never read the comments.
No, it's as Joe Rogan likes to say, you post in ghost.
Yeah. Woof. Anyways, all right. So big thanks to SYNLawn Alabama for bringing you the podcast all season long. Time for week 10. This is the last week of region play for most teams throughout the state. I think there's a couple of 9-team regions that maybe have one more week after this, but for the most part, and especially all of our teams, this is the final week of region play. It is kind of odd because the playoff fates are all decided, at least in terms of our teams, but there's a couple games where the seeding is still a little bit up in the air, and we'll talk about those now. So, game of the week. The Underlights game of the week has had phenomenal success this year. There's only been, 1 or 2 that haven't been just down to the wire, terrific ball games. Last week, no exception. I mean, another 1-point game. I mean, there's just been so many one-possession games that, I mean, I could really, I need to look at some data, but I bet in the, 8-9 years that I've done this here at Starnes Media, I maybe get like 1 or 2 games a regular season that are one possession, much less what we've gotten this season. So with all that being said, Friday night, I will be out at the Hoover Met for Vestavia Hills at Hoover. One of the, it's a nationally recognized rivalry. In recent years, it's kind of come back a little bit. Hoover went on a long streak of just kind of dominating this game, but in recent years, the Rebels have kind of made a resurgence. Vestavia dominated this game last year, but big kudos to Robert Evans for keeping the ship kind of going in the right direction. Vestavia could have easily, fallen off, starting 1-4 with that tough schedule, but they're 4-4. They're back to 500. They've locked themselves into the playoffs, and they're paying a visit to a Hoover team coming off their biggest win of the year. And Hoover's won the region now, no matter what happens in this game. Potential letdown, I don't know, but I think this is going to be a great game on Friday night.
Yeah, that's what I would wonder about. Is there any kind of letdown because you've won the region? Like, you certainly don't want to say, oh, this game doesn't matter then. I mean, like, for playoff standings for Hoover, it doesn't matter. But so is it like, you get into the questions, how do you treat this game? Like, do you start resting some guys at some point? Do you play like, hey, this is a rivalry game. We want to go out and win this thing. We want to avenge what happened last year as well. Do you just play like normal? I would lean on the side of just playing it like it's any other game. Like, well, hey, we got to win this. We're going to, play it like we've played every other game. The thing I want to see, having not seen Vestavia this year, can they find the success that they've found these last several weeks against some lesser defenses? Can they find that kind of success, or a percentage of that success against this Hoover defense? Because that's a different animal. Can you run the ball on them? Can Charlie Taft have that success through the air and on the ground? Is your stable of 19 Vestavia Hills running backs going to be able to churn out some yards and keep the chains moving? So yeah. I don't know. Like, I obviously would lean Hoover in this game. They've proven that. I mean, they're region champs for a reason. It's at their building. It's a rivalry game, but it's also the under the lights game of the week, so that means it's got to be close.
I think it will be. Now, I will say, from the Hoover perspective, the case for playing this straight up is that they have an open date before the playoffs start, so sure. Hoover will get that week off. Now, if you've got some guys that are, banged up to the point of a couple of weeks would do them a lot of good before the playoffs, then yeah, let them sit. But overall, I think Hoover is going to go at it because this game means a lot to the communities. I mean, we like to give our buddy Chandler Fullman plenty of grief, but that Vestavia Hills coaching staff and athletic administration is filled with people who have a long history at Hoover. So this game means a lot to both sides. Make no mistake. And the Rebels will be coming into the Hoover Met feeling good about themselves. They've won, 3 in a row now. And even if it has been against a little bit lesser competition, they've started to figure some things out, get some positive momentum, and that'll serve them well. And from the Hoover side, you really want to build off of what you had last week. You want to continue to make those strides that you've seen the offense take and try to start doing that more consistently, putting those drives together, moving the ball effectively down the field and capitalizing. So, and you're right. It's the game of the week, so it's got to be great.
Yeah, but exactly.
We've got 2 Thursday night games. One of them is a really big deal. Homewood heading to Minor on Thursday night. This is a game that will decide the number 2 seed in that region. And for those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with the playoff situation in Alabama, the top 2 seeds are at home in the first round of the playoffs. So you really want one of those top 2 seeds. The winner of this game gets that number 2 seed. So both teams are going to be raring to go in this one. This is going to be a big time game. Minor, they have really started to round into form this season. Adrian Abrams does such a good job over there. And Homewood, it remains to be seen. They got some guys hurt last week. We mentioned Will Myers goes out with an injury. Who knows what we'll see at quarterback there. So I don't know. This is going to be an interesting game. It might be one where we're done by 9 o'clock because both teams run the ball so much.
Yeah. There's just, I don't know what to expect. Will Myers went out, so we'll see what happens there. But man, just so much on the line. Like, winner gets a 2 seed, gets a home playoff game. Ultimately, I do think Homewood is the better team, is the more battle tested team. So I think they take that onto the road with them. But man, anytime you're playing on the road with something like that on the line with a home playoff game, because chances are if you lose this game, the loser of this game's probably heading north to Muscle Shoals where I went last year. It's a long trip. It's a cold trip. It's a tough place to play. You don't want to go there in round one. So both of these teams are going to fight hard, and I think this is going to be probably a really physical and, like you said, run the ball, try to keep the other team off the field kind of game, and wear them down, and see if you come out on top.
The other Thursday game, we've got Mountain Brook paying a visit to Shades Valley. This game honestly doesn't mean anything because Mountain Brook's locked into the 3 seed, and Shades Valley's season will be over after this contest. But we could say that, like we say, we can say that. The coaches aren't going to say that. This is another opportunity for Mountain Brook to finish the regular season on a high note. They get that bye week next week before rolling into the playoffs. So you got to think they want to go on the road and take care of business on a third straight Thursday night game for the Spartans.
Yeah, I'll be out there at that game Thursday, and I was doing some scoreboard watching this last week because I think if Pinson Valley had beaten Pell City, I think there was a scenario where Shades Valley had a chance to get in, and I was kind of hoping for that just so that this game meant a lot more. And then, as you just devastated me with, the game that I'm going to means nothing. Means nothing to us, means a lot to the players, obviously, and coaches and communities. So I haven't been to Shades Valley in a bit, so I'm just excited to go out to Frank Nick Stadium again. And we used to see a lot of region games there over the years, and so it'll be cool to see Ruben Nelson and his group and kind of what they're all about this year, and see if they can give Mountain Brook a game. And if you're Mountain Brook, it's kind of the same thing it has been for these last couple of weeks, especially is really work on yourselves, work on the fundamentals, faceless opponent, all that kind of stuff, and make sure that you are kind of peaking at the right time as we head into the playoffs, since we know they'll be heading north.
Have you been out to Shades Valley since they got the turf?
I think I've been there maybe once since they've gotten the turf.
Yeah.
And I think it was a game against Mountain Brook, actually.
Yeah. They've done a nice job out there with that stadium. All right, we got a handful of Friday games to talk about. The one that has the biggest stakes in terms of our teams, Chelsea paying a visit to Benjamin Russell. Chelsea, as we mentioned, 6-0 start, played 2 really tough opponents the last 2 weeks and have dropped those games. And now they're playing a Benjamin Russell team that is kind of in the same boat. This game decides the 3 and the 4 in the region. Both teams going into playoffs, but both teams going on the road in the first round of the playoffs. However, the caveat here is I don't think either team is going to get a favorable draw in the first round of the playoffs, but I guarantee you do not want to be the 4 and go to play Saraland in the first round of the playoffs. That just sounds like a really steep mountain to climb. So this game's a big deal. You're talking about a Chelsea team that is, like you mentioned earlier, they compete. They played really. They did. I mean, they did a lot of good things against Helena and kept that game tight and mounted that big comeback to at least make it a game at the end. They got to start out stronger a little bit this week and not get behind the 8 ball. But this Benjamin Russell team, Smitty Grider's done such a great job there the last 3 years, really building that program back up. So if you haven't been down to Martin Savary Stadium in Alex City, it's a nice place for a football game. So Chelsea fans take a drive down 280. They already deal with 280 every day anyway, so you might as well just go on south a little bit and go to the game.
Yeah, that's third straight week, a lot on the line. Like we'd talked about it before about the Chelsea's region schedule being somewhat backloaded in a way. And man, what an incredible stretch of difficulty, but also just meaning. Like you had the game against Spain Park. Who's going to be in the lead for the region? And then you get Helena, and it's like, who's going to be in the driver's seat for the 2 seed? And now, like you mentioned, it's like, could you slide from, a tie for first to 4th in the region in 3 weeks? Like it's a crazy stretch. And, we know Benjamin Russell, always very athletic, can put up a lot of points. So that Chelsea defense that, showed last week against Helena that it maybe had some holes in it, in that run defense that they're really going to have to play really well. And, it seems like the offense has been, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about Chase Strasner all year, but, last week Miller Bauman throws for over 300 yards. Obviously, our top performer of the week, CJ Durbin, goes for nearly 200 yards receiving. So the offense is doing some really, really good things. I think this is a game where that Chelsea defense is going to have to, stand pretty tall, force some 3-and-outs, force some turnovers, and let the offense work. Because, like you said, this is a game that, yeah, now you're going on the road in the first round of the playoffs, but you don't want to go to Saraland. So this is a game you want to go down to Alex City and get the dub.
All right, another game on Friday. Spain Park paying a visit to Chilton County. Spain Park with a win will run the gamut in the region slate for the second time in program history, and I think they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, Eddie Wall's in his first year at Chilton County, and I think he's the right guy for that job, and I think they're going to do big things as they continue to grow. This is just, it's a first year staff. It's a rebuilding type year in a tough 6A Region 3, and I think Spain Park goes down there and takes care of business.
Briarwood paying a visit to Hayden. Looks like, Briarwood disappointed after getting eliminated from the playoffs last week, but this is another opportunity for a win at Hayden.
Yeah, you're playing for pride, no pun intended. After John Carroll lost that game, but Hayden doesn't seem like they've had the best year. So we know how this Briarwood program is and how Coach Forrester leads that program. This isn't a team that's going to go down there and be woe is me and be like, oh, we're out of the playoffs, this doesn't matter. I think you're going to see them go down to Hayden and really give their best effort, and I expect them to go down there and win.
A couple of 7A Region 3 games. Oak Mountain is hosting Hillcrest Tuscaloosa. Both of these teams have been eliminated from the playoffs, but the Eagles will hope to get back on the winning track after last week's disappointment. And then Hewitt Trustful heading to Tuscaloosa County. We talked about T County struggles this year, so it looks like Hewitt will lock up a win, and that'll be Hewitt's last game of the regular season with the bye week next week.
Yeah, I expect Hewitt Trustful to, kind of like Spain Park going to Chilton County, just kind of go down there, take care of business. Tuscaloosa County it's been a struggle there as well. First year head coach Miles Holcomb there, they're winless, and Hewitt Trustful should have no problem there. And then the game that I'm going to, that Oak Mountain Hillcrest game, Oak Mountain's actually struggled to score the ball these last few weeks, but they've played Hoover, Vestavia, and Hewitt. So there's a reason for that. And this Hillcrest team has been somewhat susceptible to allowing some points, just like Oak Mountain has. So I feel like Friday night, my Oak Mountain Hillcrest game story might be the last one in, because I'm expecting something like 48-42 or something like that. I think I'm in for a bit of a track meet at Herdmont Park Friday night.
And then one final game, Clay Chaltville heading to Pinson Valley. Man, just a few years ago, this rivalry game was so good. For a couple years there when Clay was at the peak of its power and Pinson Valley had Bo Nix and the train was rolling. But this is more of an opportunity for Clay to get back on track after a disappointing loss.
That's exactly what I was going to say is, seeing what Pinson Valley did in person at Mountain Brook, I've seen them twice this year. I saw them against Hewitt Trustful, and Hewitt Trustful they just ran over them. But at Mountain Brook, they put some guys in some different positions, and it really worked. And they scored. They were able to move the ball. And, Mountain Brook didn't play its best game, but Pinson Valley still executed. And then against Pell City last week, they put up a lot of points again. So I do think this is a get-back game. Clay Chaltville clearly the better team. But, you've really got to show up and put it all together, especially this defense is going to kind of have its hands full with a team that has started to find some confidence and started to find some playmaking ability. And I expect Clay Chaltville's offense to pretty much be able to name its score.
That's all we've got for week 10 of the high school football season. All right, Gary, for our goal line stand today, I just kind of want to give listeners a recap of, we talked about the 8 teams that will be making the playoffs. Things aren't completely solidified yet. So last week we kind of dove into some potential matchups and all that. So I wanted to give everybody a little bit of an update on what we can expect for the first round of the playoffs, which will be on November the 8th. So I'll just kind of run down our teams with what we've got. The one we do know, Mountain Brook is going to be playing at Southside Gadsden. So first round of the playoffs, Mountain Brook at Southside. That ought to be a good one. What else do we know? Chelsea is going to play on the road, likely in the Mobile area. Clay Chaltville will be at home in the first round of the playoffs. Homewood, we'll see depending on how this week goes. Hoover will be at home. More than likely, Hewitt Trustful and Vestavia Hills will be on the road to probably the Mobile area. And Spain Park will be at home in the first round of the playoffs. And then after that, we'll see how it develops. After this week, we'll be able to talk brackets and kind of start going through some things and looking ahead and all those things that coaches hate to do or act like they don't do. But, they tell their teams one day, one thing at a time, whatever. So one final week of region play. Gary, you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. I'm curious what these playoff matchups will be, and if there is any availability in some of the nicest hotels in Fairhope.
Very much so. So, all right, that does it for this week. Big thanks to our friends at SYNLawn Alabama for partnering with us on the podcast this season. Don't forget, at Underlights365 on X, at Under the Lights on Instagram and Facebook. Just so much content from all the high schools. You can see game action. We've got band and cheerleading photos on all the games as well. So anything for everyone. So follow along. It's going to be another great week. 2 games on Thursday, a bunch more on Friday. Can't wait to see how it goes. But we appreciate you listening, and we'll be back to talk about it all again next week.